Say today, better late than never, but I certainly wish we had adhered to our constitutional responsibility before the military engagement began.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time, and I would like to ask if my colleague is prepared to close.
I am prepared to close.
Then I want to
Gentlelady's recognized.
thank you very much. I want to urge a no vote on the rule and remind us the last time we had such a weighty debate. We devoted 26 hours to it, and 263 members, more than half the House of Representatives, spoke. I agree with what has just been said by Ms. Lee. This is much too late. It comes at a very strange time, and it really says today that this is pretty much a political move, which I regret, because this is probably, as she pointed out, and those of us who have been here before having to vote for it, voting to go to war is the most solemn experience that we face here. So let me urge a no vote on the rule and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't associate myself with my colleagues who say it's much too late. It is much too late. I wish we'd had that opportunity to have this conversation before hostilities began. I'm new to this body, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps my colleagues knew hostilities were getting ready to begin. I did not. I heard about it on CNN. There was no consultation with Congress before those hostilities began. That was the right time to have this debate. That time has passed. And for those who say delay, 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 I tell you, it's already too late. We cannot delay any further. And I'm very pleased, Mr. Speaker, that the Rules Committee has made these two resolutions available, because you have two very clear choices today, Mr. Speaker. As you know, on the Senate side, there's the Kerry McCain resolution. And this resolution that we have from Mr. Hastings today largely mirrors that resolution. If you believe that what's going on in Libya is in the best interest of the United States, if you believe we have a national security interest in Libya, if you believe that the Congress should make clear that we are behind the President and what's going on in Libya, you have that choice today in the resolution offered by Mr. Hastings. If you believe that this is just another example of a war that's going to escalate, and you're concerned about that escalation, and you want to put yourself on the record as saying no, no more, no more, you have your chance to do that today with the Rooney resolution. No more. I hold here in my hand, Mr. Speaker, a copy of the Constitution of the United States of America, again ratified this week in 1788. Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have the power to declare war. Article 1, Section 9. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law. Mr. Speaker, it's easy to say that foreign policy is the dominion of the President of the United States, and it is. But the purse is the dominion of the U.S. House of Representatives. I want to harken back again to what the Chairman of the Rules Committee said on the floor earlier. This should be a time of celebration. And, Mr. Speaker, when we have troops in harm's way, it should be something that we are unified behind and believe in as a nation, that we are ready to prosecute a war effort to the fullest extent and bring our men and women home victorious. But, Mr. Speaker, this is not a topic of unanimity. This is not a topic that we have found any sort of agreement on whatsoever in this body. In fact, this is a topic that we have been focused on and focused on and focused on trying to bring to conclusion in this House, and this rule today, Mr. Speaker, gives us that opportunity. Now, I want to make clear, there's a further step that we could go. We could go one step further that says no funds shall be used, period. And when we return to this body, Mr. Speaker, I believe my colleague, Mr. Kucinich, and my colleague, Mr. Amash, are going to make that amendment available to us, and I will be voting yes when that amendment comes down the pipe. But for today, we have an opportunity to take a step in that direction. We have an opportunity to make our voice heard. Are you with it or are you against it? Do you support what's going on in Libya, or do you believe we're headed in the wrong direction as a nation? You have that opportunity today, but only, Mr. Speaker, if you vote yes for this rule to make these two measures in order. I urge a strong yes vote. With that, I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the question on the resolution.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All opposed say no.
The yeas and nays.
In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
The House is voting on the rule for consideration of two measures dealing with military action in Libya. And we're going to open up our phone lines here for your thoughts about that. Should the U.S. have a military involvement in Libya? Should the Congress have a role in that authorization? Action in military action in Libya now, nearly 100 days old. Here are the numbers to call. If you are a Republican, it's 202-585-3885. Democrats, 202-585-3886. Independents and others, 202-585-3887. Make sure you mute your television when you call in, and we will get to your phone calls momentarily. The two measures today, both introduced by Florida representatives. One's a resolution which would authorize very limited use of the military in Libya. That's sponsored by Alcee Hastings of Florida, a Democrat. Tom Rooney, the Republican, has introduced a bill that would pretty much limit funds cut off funds for Libya, except for the cases of search and rescue, surveillance, intelligence, reconnaissance, and those sorts of things, aerial refueling. What will happen is this is a vote on the rule for consideration. We expect after this the House will move on to debate the resolution, the Hastings measure, vote on that, then come back and debate the Rooney measure and vote on that as well. And that will do it pretty much legislatively for the House, not only for this week, but for next week. They are out for the district work period and up through the 4th of July. And when they come back, they will resume consideration of the defense spending bill for fiscal year 2012. Let's get to your phone calls. In Falls Church, Annie is on our Republican line. Go ahead.
Yes.
Annie in Falls Church, hello.
Hello. Yes, the House definitely has a role in this debate and should weigh in. Congress does give under the Constitution the power to declare war. The president cannot. But this is very evident of what's happening in Libya now, much like everything else that President Obama has done. He misled and said it would be a short engagement. Now we've been past 90 days, and under 90 days he's supposed to notify Congress of the U.S. intention under the War Power Act. It's reflective of the same thing that he did on the stimulus. We spent $1 trillion and there's still no jobs. He said unemployment wouldn't go above 8%. Where is it? The stimulus was supposed to have a recovery summer, and that didn't happen. So again, it's just Barack Obama misleading the nation, the same thing that he's done the entire time he's been in Congress.
Well, in a New York Times editorial today, basically supporting the Hastings measure, they wrote that Mr. Obama made the wrong choice trying to evade his responsibility under the 1973 War Powers Act. Here's Judy in Huntsville, Alabama, on our Democrats line.
Hi.
Hey, Judy.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
I'm a Democrat. I voted for Obama. A lot of what the woman said previously I don't agree with, but I got to say this. I think he was wrong, but I think he was dragged in by NATO. I think he did something he should not have done. But what I'd like to see is the United States getting out of all the wars. It's killing us. It's breaking us. And the Republicans seem to have a short memory as to how our economy got to the point it is. If we weren't spending $1 trillion a year in Afghanistan and Iraq, our economy wouldn't be in the shape it's in right now. So I agree with Mr. Kucinich. We should get out of all the wars because we can't afford it anymore. And, yes, Obama made a mistake. But I'll tell you somebody has made a mistake that they aren't talking about, and that was George Bush, who lied to the American people in order to get us into Iraq to start with.
A couple of the leading anti-war voices in the House have already weighed in the rule debate. That would be Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich and others. More debate ahead. This is a vote on the rule for the consideration of the two Libya measures. Howard's in Anderson, California. Independent line.
Yeah, I think that I got two points I'd like to make. First off is that, yeah, this is wrong. You have to go through Congress, or you're supposed to go through Congress. But more importantly, I think, is that we as a nation really have to start dealing with truths. I hear so many comments that make a claim about what Bush did, and the things are exactly identical to what Obama is doing now. Actually, they're not. Bush went through and got permission from our Congress, followed the laws. But we have to start dealing not as Democrats and Republicans or independents, which I am, but we have to start dealing as Americans and deal with truth and debate from there.
The House will debate two measures on Libya. Then, assuming passage of the rule here, the one that comes up first would authorize limited use of force in Libya, but wouldn't authorize ground troops. And the second one, the bill would prohibit the Defense Department from spending any money to support the ongoing operations except for the cases of refueling, reconnaissance, and rescue, and some other cases as well. We're taking your thoughts on the issue of Libya and whether U.S. should support military action there and what the role of Congress, specifically the House here, is in that. In Black Oak, South Dakota, rather, here is Shobi. Shobi is on our... No, we lost Shobi. We'll go to Jasper in Dansville, Texas. Democrat line. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jasper, this is in Gainesville, Texas, actually.
Okay.
The Constitution is very clear that Congress its obligation, responsibility to make a declaration of war. The War Powers Act was necessary to deal with imminent threats to the United States or our interests. And what's going on in Libya was not an imminent threat to the United States. This is all about Libyan oil, light crude that's primarily used by Europe because they don't have the refineries to deal with heavy crude. I think that the president made a huge mistake by not consulting with Congress. I think Congress probably would have allowed some limited action, to preserve, lives of some innocent people there in the eastern part of Libya.
Jasper, on our Democrats line, the Washington Post says that the Republicans contend that the president has bypassed that 1973 law that requires presidents to seek congressional approval before sending forces into hostilities. Beverly is in Oklahoma City. Go ahead on our Republicans line. Hi.
Hi. I think he needs to address Congress. The sooner the better, and I think we should get out of Libya.
Here is Michelle in Woodbury, New Jersey. She's an independent. Welcome.
Yes, good morning. I think that it should be a bill of impeachment. Kucinich is going to wait until after the recess to do anything. It's cowardice by the Congress not to confront him. And also, the president said the Arab League invited him. We're using our troops as mercenaries, and there should be investigation of how the Saudis paid for the president's postgraduate degree.
This debate ahead. Thank you for the call. This debate ahead in Libya happening at the same time that U.S. intelligence is saying that Gaddafi might exit Tripoli. The Wall Street Journal reporting that new U.S. intelligence shows Colonel Muammar Gaddafi fleeing Tripoli for a more secure location outside the capital, according to U.S. officials, raising the prospect that the Libyan leaders' hold on power is increasingly fragile. Next up, we go to Nick in Chicago, Independent line. Hi.
Hey, how you doing? Listen, my whole take on this is this. One, I'm walking in the president's shoes. We don't know what goes on a day-to-day basis, what he deals with, what trials and tribulations he has to go through. When there's a war, and NATO wanted us to be involved in this, to stop what's going on over there in Libya, and he joined in on it. The pointing of fingers has to stop. This country has to unite. We have to believe in one. We have to believe in God. That's all I have to say.
In King Street, South Carolina, David is on our Republican line. What are your thoughts, David, on the role of the U.S. Congress and whether the U.S. should authorize military action in Libya?
What we have is we've got a complete lack of following rules and policy. The American voters and taxpayers, their money is being spent without their knowledge and without their approval. This has got to stop. It's got to stop.
Next up is Middlesex, New Jersey, and Joe on our Democrats line.
Yeah, my name is Joe Belfront from Middlesex, New Jersey. The president did the right thing going into Libya. He had the okay for the Arab League and the United Nations to go. There are no troops on the ground in Libya. I wish they would read the Constitution fully instead of reading half of the Constitution, where it says the president has a right to intervene with Arab and the United Nations with that. Ask him to intervene.
All right, Joe, thanks for your call. Just a reminder, folks, make sure you mute your television when you call in. What's happening on the floor is a vote on the rule for consideration to the two Libya measures. The first one we'll see come up, provided passage of this rule, is a resolution which would authorize limited action in Libya. It would prevent the use of ground troops. The second measure that will come up this afternoon is the bill sponsored by Tom Rooney of Florida, which would cut off most funds for the Libyan operation, except for the case of reconnaissance rescue, air refueling, search and rescue, and things like that. A couple more phone calls here as the vote continues. Joe's in Primus, Michigan. Hi, Joe, on our Republican line. Going fine, thanks.
Obama is wrong. He should just get out of Libya. We have no business being in Libya. And with the blaming Bush about not going to Congress, well, they had 3 years where Iraq wouldn't allow our inspectors in, and I know they had weapons of mass destruction.
Next up, we go to Sheila in Norwalk, Connecticut. Hi there. Independent line.
Hi. Good morning. I say we get out. We don't go into Libya. No more wars at all. Dennis Kucinich he's right on target, and I would like him to throw his hat in the ring for 2012, not 2016. 2012, we need him as president. He'll keep us out of wars, and he'll get this economy on track. He's the one that knows what to do, and he will, keep us on track, and he's the only way to go. That's what I say. Dennis Kucinich, get in the ring, because I'm counting on you. Well,
Dennis Kucinich isn't running for president. Ron Paul is. Both of them have spoken already here on this Friday morning about the upcoming debate on Libya, and it's likely we'll hear more from them as well. In Hatchville, North Carolina, Terry, independent caller.
Yes, I'm for pulling out the troops out. Well, we don't have any ground troops in Libya, but I'm for not doing anything in Libya and stop being the policeman of the world. We've got to stop this. We've got to let other countries deal with their own problems and watch and be concerned, though, when it becomes, a possible national threat to us. But if it's not, then we stop being the policeman of the world and stop taking care of our own country, our own economy, because all the money we're spending on the military right now, on needless actions, we could be spending and boosting up our economy and getting jobs and helping out here, because we got more problems here than we do in helping out the world.
Secretary of State Clinton was on Capitol Hill yesterday to testify about Afghanistan, but she was also in front of the Democratic caucus yesterday talking to members about these Libyan resolutions, the resolution and the Libyan bill that are on the floor for debate today. Jonathan Allen of Politico writes that she didn't appear to win many hearts and minds. He writes that the depth of the House's overall dissent will be tested today when the chamber takes up a resolution to authorize the war, which is widely expected to fail, and a bill to prohibit the White House from spending money on the mission in Libya. It is the second measure, a historic yet largely symbolic clash over the war powers of the President and Congress that will be most closely watched by vote counters and advocates on both sides of the debate. We go next to Manhattan. Sandra on our Democrats line. Thanks for waiting patiently there. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I would like the people of this country to put aside their differences, Democrat and Republican. That is not going to solve anything. What we have to do is wonder what the world's thinking is in attacking one African country after another and going in and starting wars with them. I don't understand this. We have bad leaders in every country, including this one. That is no reason to start a war. It certainly is no reason to spend all of the taxpayers' money in this country. We have to sit down and really figure out what is going on, and right now we have to get out of Libya.
Sam is in Philadelphia, Republican caller.
Hello?
Sam, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you. We need to get out of Libya, out of Afghanistan, out of Iraq, all that stuff. These wars are all based on lies. Bring all the troops home. That's how we can support them. And the number one concern is we need a new investigation in 9/11 to look for dynamite, explosive evidence. They didn't know explosive evidence. They didn't look for it at all. I'm with architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and we need to push a new investigation.
So you think the report, the 9/11 Commission report, isn't truthful?
Absolutely not. It's a sham. They said it was. Half of the people that were in that, they didn't even have any what do you call that? I get so confused when I get live on air.
Well, a little bit off the topic, so we appreciate you calling in, but we're going to move on to William in New Haven, Connecticut. Your thoughts on these Libya measures coming up in the House today?
Yes, this measure coming up in the House, I think we should play a limited ground role in the war in Libya because of the domino effect. There's dissent in the whole Middle East for the wanting of democracy. We could maybe dispose of the whole problem we have over there, including the Taliban.
The first measure that will come up is Alcee Hastings' resolution that would authorize limited use of United States military forces in Libya, but no ground troops. This is similar to a measure that was introduced by Senator John Kerry and Senator John McCain midweek in the U.S. Senate. In fact, the senators spoke about it some on the Senate floor this week, and you can find some of their comments online in our video library at cspan.org. Let's go next to Leroy in Greensboro, North Carolina, on our Republican line. Leroy, are you there?
Actually, that was the Democrat.
Okay, go ahead with your comments.
What I was saying, seems like the only thing that Obama, they're in disagreement, not that the fact that he went into Libya, is just that the number of days that he went. So it's really like a technical issue on just really the amount of days that he went into Libya without notifying the Congress. And to me, it seems like it's really a waste of time for all the representatives to give their opinion on, elaborating on, the fact that he didn't get in touch with the Congress to discuss it. And instead of just moving on and addressing the other issues, it's obvious Obama didn't probably plan on being in there more than 60 days because he knew he would be breaking the law.
And the Washington Post writes about that. They say the president has responded to concerns that he has flouted the intent of the 1973 War Powers Resolution by arguing that the Libyan conflict should not count as hostilities. Here we go to Richmond, Virginia. On our independent line is Brian. Brian, hi there.
How you doing, sir? I'm just upset that everybody's pointing the finger at the individuals, Obama, Kucinich, whoever they're just trying to blame. And if you're too blind to see that everything is corporation backed, and everybody makes a decision based upon the better of the corporation to get more money.
Well, somebody mentioned oil earlier today. Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, oil, regardless, commodities, oil, whatever you want it to be, it's whoever's pocket's going to get bigger is the way they're going to vote. And if you think Obama has a decision on which way they're going to go, I mean, really, the military should be pulled out of every country, and we should worry about our infrastructure and what's going on in our country before we go and debacle on other people's problems in other countries.
Republican line next, Riggsville, North Carolina. Jonah.
Good morning. You know, the thing that frightens me the most is listening to these folks saying we need to stop, pull out of Afghanistan, pull out of Iraq, pull out of Libya. You know, it's time to grow up and face the real world. We can't do that. We tried the Monroe Doctrine. It didn't work. I mean, we cannot do that. These people are crazy. They're not what we can't deal with them because we don't understand them. We have to do what we're doing. And I think it's time we backed our soldiers and they're fighting and doing everything it can and to accept the fact that our government is doing the best it knows how to do. Now, granted, the economy's shot, everything else is.
Hey, John, though, but what are your thoughts on the best role, or is there a role for the U.S. in particular on this Libya operation?
Yeah, we've got to look after what's our interest. We've got to. There's no way around it. Gaddafi has proved over the years he's not concerned about America except he'd like to kill us. Now, you know, we got to get him out of there. We got to get the world back in a peaceful state. We're facing the end times. I mean, let's face it, it's there.
The vote is winding down. We'll try to get a few more calls here. This is Chicago. Nyazis, is that your name? I hope I got it right.
Yeah, it's Nyazis Divine from Chicago. Basically, the United States cannot afford to be in these wars. Really, we just need to go ahead and worry about the United States. We cannot afford to continue to fund these wars overseas when our problems are before us and we are not properly handling our problems, and our problems are just continuing to worsen. We can't afford it. We need to get out of there.
Thank you for your call. Let's hear from Brian in Apollo Beach, Florida, a Republican caller. Brian, hi there.
Hi, how you doing? I'd like to comment on something a caller said earlier about living in the real world. Well, when empires spread themselves out too thin, they generally collapse. The USSR collapsed for economic reasons, and we're headed in the same path. You can't spend $1 trillion a year on a foreign policy and expect prosperity economically in the United States. It's not realistic. We're paying higher prices as a result. That's how they're rationing out gas and food. I mean, look at gas. Look at food prices. They're inflating the dollar to support this foreign policy that's not sustainable. It's time to end the war. Time to pull out of Libya.
Another Florida call here. Carl on our Democrats line. What city are you calling from, Carl?
Coconut Creek, Florida.
Okay, go ahead with your thoughts.
Yes. I don't know if we should pull out of Libya, but I'm going to tell you this. We need to stop playing hall monitor to the world and spreading ourselves thin like the last guy said. We are spreading ourselves thin, and there's only a matter of time before we could do no more. Then what happens then? What happens to the Gaddafis of the world? What do they do to us? What do that type of person, what do those people do to us at that point when we're so weak and so beaten that we can no longer defend ourselves?
And for the last thought, we'll stay in Florida and Fort Lauderdale, and George on our Democrats line.
I just think we should end this war. All this war doesn't make no sense. I think they put all the troops from all the war that we have in the world and concentrate on jobs. Jobs are important. Places like Macy's and Walmart who are employing people just 8 hours per day and all these things, they should concentrate on more. They're robbing the government of the tax system.
So we have at least 2 hours of debate ahead on Libya. Again, there are two measures. One is a limited authorization resolution sponsored by Alcee Hastings of Florida. Tom Rooney, also of Florida, a Republican, sponsoring a bill that would cut off most of the spending, the Defense Department funds, this year's funds anyway, for the NATO operation in Libya, except for cases of search and rescue, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and the like. We think the resolution will come up first, Alcee Hastings' resolution. That'll get a vote, and then debate on the bill after that. So more ahead, and live coverage here on C-SPAN.
On this vote, the yeas are 240, the nays are 167, and the resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The House will be in order. Please remove your conversations from the floor. Please clear the well and remove their conversations from the floor. The House will be in order. Members will please remove their conversations from the floor. You ready? Okay. The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentle lady from Florida rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to House Resolution 328, I call up the joint resolution H.J. Res. 68 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 68, Joint Resolution authorizing the limited use of the United States Armed Forces in support of the NATO mission in Libya.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a point of order.
Gentleman will suspend. Gentleman will state his point.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the gravity of the legislation before us, but I rise to make a point of order that this bill violates Clause 11 of Rule 21. This section of the rule states that it shall not be in order to consider a bill or a joint resolution which has not been reported by a committee until it has been available to members for 72 hours.
Pursuant to House Resolution 328, all points of order against consideration are waived.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman will state his inquiry.
Can the Chair tell the House when H.R. 2278 and H.J. Res. 68 were made available to members?
Gentleman has not stated a proper parliamentary inquiry.
Further parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker.
Will state.
Mr. Speaker, the Speaker has said that he will not bring a bill to the floor that has not been available for 72 hours. Have these bills been available for 72 hours, Mr. Speaker?
The gentleman has once again not stated a proper parliamentary inquiry.
Further parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman will state.
Is the majority waiving the position of the Speaker, waiving the rules as it relates to the legislation before us?
The gentleman from Illinois is engaging in debate and not stating a parliamentary inquiry. Does the gentleman have a parliamentary inquiry?
Further parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
General state.
The fact of the matter is this bill has not been available for 72 hours and not even 3 calendar days.
The gentleman is out of order. The gentleman is not stating a parliamentary inquiry. Pursuant to House Resolution 328, the joint resolution is considered read. The joint resolution shall be debatable for 1 hour with 40 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs and 20 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services. The gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Ross-Lehtinen, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Berman, each shall control 20 minutes. The gentleman from California, Mr. McKeon, and the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Smith, shall each control 10 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.J. Res. 68.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized. Suspend. The House will be in order. Lady may proceed.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do not support a complete U.S. withdrawal from NATO's Operation Unified Protector. I believe that it is necessary for U.S. armed forces to remain engaged in a limited capacity. However, I cannot support an authorization which constitutes our current level of engagement for an entire year. This is what is proposed in H.J. Res. 69, offered by my friend from Florida, Mr. Hastings, and I therefore must rise in opposition to his resolution. This resolution not only authorizes U.S. military engagement in Libya far beyond even the 90-day NATO extension, but it justifies U.S. military engagement in Libya as undertaken to enforce a United Nations Security Council resolution and at the request of the Transitional National Council, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and the Arab League. So we must ask, where is the United States Congress in this equation? If an authorization resolution had been put forward in February, I might have been able to support it. I understand the mission. But in the intervening period, conditions have changed significantly on the ground in Libya, within NATO, with our NATO partners, and here in the U.S. Decisive action with congressional authorization at the outset might have solved this problem quickly. But now we have drifted into an apparently open-ended commitment with goals that remain only vaguely defined. And that is at the heart of the problem, Mr. Speaker. The President asserted, quote, "These strikes will be limited in their nature, duration, and scope," end quote. Well, it is now day 97 of our involvement of U.S. armed forces in hostilities regarding Libya, yet Gaddafi still clings to power, and the opposition appears to be no closer to a decisive victory. Command for the military operation has been transferred to NATO, yet the constrained role the President has said is being played by U.S. forces in Libya still includes nearly 1/4 of the total sorties flown in Libya, suppression of enemy air defense through missile strikes, strikes by unmanned predators on Gaddafi targets, nearly 70% of the mission's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and over 75% of all aerial refueling. Yet the President has yet to explain just what American interests are at stake and just what outcomes he is hoping to achieve. The resolution offered by our Speaker, Speaker Boehner, and adopted by this chamber on June 3rd posed specific questions that required straight answers. Instead, we received a letter and accompanying documents from the Acting Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs and the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Legislative Affairs, which stated that U.S. action in Libya were, and I quote, taken in response to direct appeals from the Libyan people and acting with a mandate from the United Nations, end quote. Let me repeat, quote, a mandate from the United Nations, end quote. The administration proceeded to justify its current policy by asserting that U.S. military operations in Libya do not constitute hostilities. This argument is so incredulous that even the attorneys in the Office of the Legal Counsel do not agree. Therefore, I am not optimistic that the reporting provisions in the resolution we are considering today, which calls for, quote, a full and updated explanation of the President's legal and constitutional rationale for conducting military operations in Libya, end quote, will be fulfilled in a fulsome manner respectful of congressional prerogatives. Again, I must underscore that I do not support a complete withdrawal from our commitments concerning Libya. That would be dangerous. That would be ill-advised. A complete withdrawal of all U.S. military assets from the Libya operations would undermine our intelligence efforts and our foreign policy goals and would all but assure a victory for Gaddafi. It can lead to greater instability, which could affect NATO operations in Iraq and Afghanistan at a critical stage of transition. There are also proliferation concerns at stake, particularly as an increasing number of weapons have moved into the region and reportedly fallen into the hands of extremist organizations, including al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb. The Gaddafi regime is an unpredictable regime that has chemical weapons, including mustard and possibly sarin gas. While a complete withdrawal is unacceptable, the resolution before us is also unacceptable. The resolution effectively ratifies that all of the President has done, and it would grant him the blessings of Congress to continue on his present course. This resolution before us would enable mission creep rather than setting clear parameters for U.S. engagement. I must therefore oppose this resolution, and I reserve the balance of our time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the resolution, and I yield 2 minutes to the sponsor of the resolution, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Howard. It's high time that Congress asserts its authority and engages proactively with the administration on this most serious question of war. I just kind of wonder where my colleagues have been all these years that we have had presidents in war. It'll be interesting to see a matchup of their votes with this one. Mr. Speaker, the underlying legislation authorizes the limited use of United States forces in support of the NATO mission in Libya. This legislation is a bipartisan effort to prevent the kind of open-ended, indefinite military commitments we have elsewhere in the world. Register that as Afghanistan and Iraq. This resolution is a companion to forward-leaning Senate legislation introduced by Senators Kerry, McCain, and Cardin and Durbin. Immediately after they introduced the resolution in the Senate, I brought it to the House so that we can make progress on this very important debate before us. If I had my way, and I don't, Mr. Chairman, we wouldn't be in Libya at all. But I don't have my way, and here we are, and the solution now is going to be to cut off funding and suddenly walk out. We have a responsibility to our allies. As long as we are continuing to supply logistics, material, and critical intelligence and operational capabilities, and no boots are on the ground, we must support our allies who are carrying out the direct combat operations. We must stand with NATO. Again, Mr. Speaker, if I had my way, and I don't, there are revisions to this resolution that I believe the Congress ought to consider. I maintain that a better date to end the authorization would be in September, and certainly no later than December. The one-year authorization in this one limits the President's ability to engage our armed forces indefinitely so that we don't find ourselves neck-deep in another war. At the same time, this authorization prohibits the use of ground forces, and I need 15 seconds.
Time has expired.
I yield the gentleman an additional 15 seconds.
And I won't use all of that. At the same time, this authorization prohibits the use of ground forces and requires the President to continually report to Congress. I would rather us use some of Libya's frozen assets so that we could have them pay for the mischief that they began.
Gentlelady from Florida.
So much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Paul, a member of our Committee on Foreign Affairs.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding and asking consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, this is a resolution that endorses the policies that have been going on for 4 months. Not only is the Congress basically been pretty strong in opposition to what's been going on, the American people are even more so. So what this resolution does is endorses exactly what has been going on, another unconstitutional war, involvement and justification under NATO and United Nations, doing it secretly. There's an attempt to restrain the funding of this effort over in Libya, but why and how can we restrain it? Because we've never authorized it. Restrain on authorized funds? Well, the funds weren't authorized. The President just goes and do it. What we're talking about here is the challenge for the Congress on looking at the unitary president. The unitary president has been around for quite a few years, and that means the presidents do what they want, and the Congress just acknowledges it. So that is what we're doing. This is what this resolution does. It acknowledges and gives authority to the President to pursue exactly what he has been doing. So obviously, H.J. Res. 68 for me is a very, very strong no, because the last thing we need to do is be giving explicit support and explicit authorization for the very policies that so many people now think are taken ill-advisedly. It says that this resolution also says you don't send in ground troops. Well, that is fine, no ground troops. But in this day and age, war can go on for a long time without the ground troops, and just think it happened to a degree in Bosnia. But it didn't exempt such things as special forces. The CIA's been in Libya, and I'm sure there will be, as it's in many, many other hundreds of countries. Contractors, when we can't send in troops, we send in contractors. We have as many contractors in Afghanistan as we do the military. So cut a couple thousand troops out of Afghanistan and not change and add some contractors, nothing ever changes. But this whole idea of legalizing this effort to legalize the bombing, at least give the authority to the President to continue this, is foolhardy. How many more wars can we withstand? I mean, what number is this? This is, I think, number 5, and today in the paper is number 6 coming. How long will it be before we're in Syria? So go into Syria tomorrow, and then in 90 days we'll start talking about Syria again. Instead, we in Congress have allowed us to give up the responsibilities, because the responsibility of going to war should have been and still remains constitutionally mandated that the Congress makes these decisions. The President is not supposed to get us engaged and then anybody falls on their face and say, whatever you need, we'll endorse it, we'll do it. But, we have another resolution coming up shortly, and unfortunately, I am convinced that the next resolution...
Gentleman's recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
Unfortunately, I think the next resolution, H.R. 227A, doesn't do much differently, because it has too many exceptions. It says deny funding, but there are too many exceptions, and the exceptions are to allow the very things that the President's doing. So both resolutions have deep shortcomings. Both resolutions should be defeated if you're opposed to this war in Libya. And I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 90 seconds to the gentleman from Washington, Mr. McDermott.
Gentleman from Washington is recognized for 1 1/2 minutes. Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the President's response to Libya. A week after it started, I received a phone call from a professor at the University of Washington who had left, been a very distinguished professor, and was back in Libya. He is now the finance minister, Dr. Tahouni. He said to me, please give us air cover. If we can protect us from the air, we can take care of it ourselves on the ground. And as I listened to him, I thought of an experience I had with President Clinton. I flew to Africa, to Kigali, and met with people who had been part of the massacre, the maimed. And then I saw the President go into the hangar and speak to 500 Rwandans and apologize for not having responded to the Rwandan massacre at the first day. This was a situation where the Libyans were asking for it. It was one where the Arab League was asking for it. This is not something that was cooked up in the White House and created and sent out. This was done in response to people on the ground. And my belief is that these kinds of situations require the President to act decisively, and he did, and I support him.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Judge Poe, Vice Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the chairlady yielding me time on this issue. Mr. Speaker, going to war is a big deal. That's why our forefathers put in the Constitution that when America is to go to war, it is Congress that is to lead that charge. It is Congress to authorize America going to war. And that's been the law in the Constitution since it was written. Then came the War Powers Resolution. And Congress decided that it would give a little of that constitutional authority to the President for a period of days until he justified his action before Congress. We can argue whether the War Powers Resolution is constitutional or not, but in any event, Congress has not led America to war in Libya. The President has. The President made that decision. And as James Madison, the author of the Constitution, said in a letter to Thomas Jefferson, and I paraphrase, it has been the history of peoples that it has been the executive branch that has led a country to war. And that's why our Constitution prevented kings and dictators and even presidents from leading this country to war. It must be authorized by Congress. But now we find ourselves in America's at least third war in Libya. The President took us to war, and now on this day we are being asked to support and justify that war in this resolution. I vote no on this resolution. We have no business in Libya. Even the administration has said it's not in the national security interest of the United States to be in Libya. So why are we there? We're there because we don't like Omar Gaddafi. Well, there are a lot of bad guys in the world. And if we start picking them off one at a time, we will be at war with most of the world. Because most of the world is led by rogue dictators or bad guys. We have no business being in Libya. We have no business justifying this war on the House floor. It is Congress's responsibility to defund any further action in Libya. And that is what we should do. It's unfortunate we don't have that up or down vote. I wish we could vote up or down today on that issue and let the House decide if we should be in war in Libya. $700 million have already been spent in the war in Libya. It's hard to figure out where that money came from. I get different answers from different people about where the President got that money. But maybe we should spend that $700 million in the United States building America rather than blowing up Libya. I think that would be a better use of funds. We need to take care of America. We shouldn't be involved in somebody else's civil war in Libya. And who are the rebels? We're not sure who they are either. They may be extremists, they may be patriots, they may be a democratic philosophy. We have no idea. I'd ask for another minute.
Gentleman's time has expired.
The gentleman has an additional 30 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
So we don't know who the rebels are. They may be worse than Omar Gaddafi. Now, isn't that a lovely situation if they take control? We replace an oppressive regime with an extremist radical regime. And that's all because we are in a war that was unauthorized by this Congress, cut off all funds, vote against this resolution, and that's just the way it is.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to a gentleman with the opposite view of this issue than I have, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Kucinich.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
What? We don't have enough wars going on? A war in Iraq, a war in Afghanistan? We need one more war? We have to wage war against another nation which did not attack us? We have to wage war against another nation which does not represent an actual or imminent threat to the United States? Mr. Speaker, I have to tell you, I have been all over this country, and I haven't had a single person come up to me to tell me, you know, Dennis, what America needs is another war. The last thing we need is to be voting to go to war. There are plenty of reasons to oppose the war in Libya. It's unconstitutional. Article 1, Section 8 has given the Congress the power to declare war. It's illegal. The War Powers Resolution was passed over a presidential veto to allow the President latitude to respond when there's an imminent threat to the U.S. while retaining the constitutional duty of Congress. Even the President's top legal advisors at the Pentagon and the Department of Justice determines that the War Powers Resolution applies to the war in Libya. Another reason is Americans don't want this war. A poll taken at the beginning of the month by CBS found that 6 in 10 Americans do not think the United States should be involved in conflict within Libya. Just 30% of Americans in that poll thought the United States was doing the right thing by taking part in the current military conflict. A majority of Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike think the U.S. should not be involved in Libya. Next, this war is a distraction. Our flailing economy demands the full attention of Congress and the President. The American people have little patience for less, especially for war of choice. The cost of the war, Mr. Speaker, we've spent $750 million so far. If we keep going on, it'll cost billions. We have to end this war, vote against this authorization. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, a member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce.
Well, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I stand today in support of this resolution. The world is watching our actions today. The world is asking, what are we going to do? We talk all the time about allowing Europe to take the lead in certain areas, allowing NATO to take the lead in foreign policy, and they've done that. Now will we today pull the rug out from under them simply because we have a dispute between the legislative and the executive branch? I think the President should have come to this chamber too, but he didn't. But the wrong thing to do is to pull funding, and the right thing to do is to give him the authorization to go into Libya. A slaughter almost occurred, and we were able to stop it by our presence there. The vote we take in the House today will have implications far beyond our shores and far into the future. Finally, I'm reminded of a quote by George Washington, which states, "Liberty, when it begins to take root, is a plant of rapid growth." I support this resolution and would urge all my colleagues to do the same. In doing so, we will be supporting the planting of freedom and liberty in the Middle East. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California.
I'm pleased to yield 1.5 minutes to the ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Dix.
The gentleman is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I strongly support the Hastings Amendment. In my judgment, the President's initial commitment of U.S. air power and naval forces to support the international effort was appropriate, and certainly within his powers as Commander-in-Chief. The U.S. effort was undertaken in concert with a broad coalition of nations, and it followed a resolution adopted in the United Nations Security Council authorizing all necessary measures to protect Libyan civilians attempting to overthrow the oppressive regime of Muammar Gaddafi. The Gaddafi government's response to the uprising inspired by Arab Spring was to use force against civilians and opposition forces, and the brutal measures prompted the international outcry and the UN action. In March, the President clearly outlined the rationale for our involvement in this military action. While the direct U.S. leadership of this effort lasted a brief time, U.S. forces remain engaged in the NATO operation, and in this chamber today we are considering both the resolution authorizing the continued use of limited U.S. involvement in this effort or an immediate withdrawal from it. While I believe it would have been more appropriate for the President, under the terms of the War Powers Act, to come to Congress earlier, I believe the language offered by Hastings of Florida, similar to the language introduced in the other body by Senators McCain and Kerry, is the appropriate course of action at this time. The language preserves the understanding between the administration and Congress that U.S. ground forces are not appropriate at this time and were not asked for by the rebels. The strict limitation of funds in the resolution offered by Mr. Rooney of Florida would end our involvement unilaterally. I believe this action would be unwise and that it would materially harm our relationship with NATO allies. When I hear many of my colleagues on the other side of the House chamber speaking in favor of abandoning the cause, I'm reminded of Ronald Reagan, who attacked Libya with air power and called Gaddafi the mad dog of the Middle East. And I yield back to the remainder.
Has expired. Gentlelady from